Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the jungle. I'm Hamilton Winters, your host, and I could not be more excited to be joined by my good friend, founder of the Dilworth Group and author of Motivation for the Masses, John Dilworth. John, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Hamilton. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's always a good day when I get to see you.
Oh, man.
So you light up a room. It's contagious.
I'm humbled.
You're a good man. Well, we'll start like I always start. Give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. Give us a little bit of insight into who John Dilworth is and kind of how we became acquainted and a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so I'm John Dilworth II, so I'm my father's son. I'm an Atlanta native, and I am kind of stuck between two worlds. One of them is technology, and the other is motivational speaking and poetry. So I kind of really pursue both of those things very passionately. On the technology side, I've had an IT consulting firm since 2013. And on the motivational speaking and poetry side, I've done a lot of things that have hopefully touched, motivated a lot of people through God's purpose in my life, just to be a motivator of the masses. And it's interesting because I only motivate people just through living as an example. And when I had the pleasure of meeting you, it kind of just evolved into a very motivational relationship, not only from me to you, but also in reverse. You motivate me a lot. I've really enjoyed watching you grow into the man of God that you are, and I know that there's a lot of things that are ahead for you, and I'm very happy to be a witness of it.
Thank you.
But your friendship is great, man. It's been some years now.
It has.
Yeah.
And I wanted to dive into that a little bit the night that we met because it was so special, and it'll forever be in my heart as one of the most just divine relationships that I've ever formed. Give me a little bit of insight into your perspective on that so that they can get a little bit of insight as well.
The way that we met was, I think, the epitome of an organic start to a friendship. I was visiting friends. You were doing the same.
Yep.
And even though we were in the same place, we were in this beautiful courtyard. There was a fireplace going. I think we had a couple cigars going. And some may look at our two parties as being in the same place but two different worlds.
Yep.
Yeah. We're just a couple or group of guys hanging out, had some girls with us and everything. And you were with another person who I met, who's a very special person to me as well. And we kind of just converged. Yep. I think the cigars is what attracted us to each other.
It absolutely is.
And then from there, our conversation started with, "Hey, how are you doing? I'm John."
Yep.
I'm Hamilton. Next thing we know, we're all around the fire, tears coming out of eyes, prayers going up.
Yep.
And I think it speaks a lot about who you are, the spirituality that you carry with you. It just connected with mine and with the rest of our group as well. And it's everlasting. So I think the way we met is one that I'll never forget. And there's no way I think that I could ever describe to someone else the way that night went and have them really understand how special it was. Yep. But I'll just say it was very, very special indeed.
I couldn't have summed it up any better than you did. So thank you for that. Like you said, you used the word organic, and I can't think of a better word other than maybe divine, because it just was divine. That folks put, God puts folks in your path that He knows you need to be doing life with, and that's you, John. So thanks for joining us here this morning. I wanted to get into really whatever you want to get into. I know you have the business stuff with the IT and technology consulting group, which is interesting in itself. We could be here for an hour talking about that. You've got your Motivation for the Masses, volumes of books that are poetic autobiographies of your own, which are incredible works of art that I've had the great privilege of being able to read. But then you also are just a man of many talents and of many interests. You're a man, a Renaissance man, if you will.
Oh, wow.
So you let me know kind of where you want to take this thing. Do you want to start with the books? Do you want to talk about business? Do you want to talk about other things that are just on your heart? Let me know.
Yeah, well, thanks for just giving me that freedom to just be able to speak from my heart. And from the motivational side, the books are called Motivation for the Masses, a poetic autobiography. And they are basically a chronologically ordered collection of the poems that I wrote from the very first when I was 16 years old. And they go all the way up to now. So far, I've completed the first 2 volumes of this, and each chapter is a year in my life. And it's not just my life, but the life of my poetry. And it's a poetic autobiography because the story that Motivation for the Masses is telling is not the story of my life, but the story of the life of my poetry. And I think it's a very unique approach. And it's been a blessing to me to put it all together, because as I go back and, compile this work that I've done, the words that I wrote at 16 and 21 and 25 and even now at 39, they motivate me. And that's what led me to say, I've got to share this with others. The technology side of what I do, oddly enough, started with being in high school, participating in technology programs. But then between graduating from high school and being a very young adult, I got into a lot of trouble. I was definitely going astray, as one might say, right? But God was with me the whole time, which is the part that's so amazing about it. But I was deep into a life of trouble. But throughout this trouble, I was still writing. And so the technology piece kind of faded away and took a back seat to me just being a young, wild youth, right? But I came across an opportunity to go to Iraq. And this was in 2005 when the war there was a hot war. And people thought I was crazy because I was not in the military. But there were opportunities to go and be a civilian and do jobs overseas. And I was working in a warehouse and went over there driving or operating forklifts and all this kind of heavy machinery. But I was studying in my downtime to be certified in technology. And I took those tests literally in these makeshift tents that were set up by the military that had comms where we could actually get internet service and everything. And I was taking my exams there. And while I was still in Iraq, I was able to transition from being the guy who was driving the forklift to the guy who was now supporting the IT infrastructure for the military.
That's awesome.
And that's how it got started. And I never really let it go. And it kind of naturally just paired with my entrepreneurial spirit, and I ended up starting my consulting firm. But being a part of those two worlds and still having the past that I had really, I think, is relevant to a lot of the things that we're seeing really come to light in 2020 and even prior to. And I've experienced a lot of some of the things that we're seeing broadcasted now, from the mistreatment of young black men by police officers. I've experienced, like everyone, this pandemic world we're living in, right? And these things kind of combine to cultivate who I am. And when I see what's going on, it doesn't surprise me at all. But I also am able to relate to a lot of those experiences that so many don't understand. And I think that a part of what I want to do is really figure out, what is my part? How do I help? How do I contribute? How do I share perspective that can help others truly understand what's really going on with the world, especially in America in 2020?
I love it. I made a a statement a few months ago that said 2020 isn't the problem, it's exposing all of our problems. Everybody wants to blame it on the year, and it never fails that on December 31st of every year, your timeline is full of nothing but, see you later, 2019, good riddance. And this year will not be any different. It'll actually be more, I assume, than ever before. With that being said, you see all of this just boiling pot overflowing. I will never be you, and you can never be me. And so when you have 7.5 billion people in the world, each person brings their own experience to the table. And so you either stay in your own experience and you judge the world based on the only things that your two eyes have seen, or you have conversations with folks like you that are vulnerable and that are open, and you're able to see a small glimpse of what your life has looked like through your two eyes, which 2 turns into 4, turns into 8, turns into 16, and then it's exponential. And you have a more well-rounded view of the world that you live in. Give me some of those thoughts and feelings and emotions, and tell me about your experience in watching this year unfold, because I'm sure that we have different perspectives. At the same time, I feel like we have a lot more similarities than we do differences.
I think so too. I agree. One thing I really can draw from what you just said was the concept that everyone has their experience, a unique experience that they kind of are bringing to the way they interact, right? The way we socialize. And one thing about people's experiences is that sometimes there are so many likenesses in sets of experiences. You have you look at the concept of a poor, a middle class, and a wealth or a rich set of people, right? There are some things that poor people just, even though they're still individual people, there are some experiences that they just understand. As the middle class has certain experiences that are fairly similar, even though everybody's an individual. What happens is when you have a collective experience, it can be one that is positive. It can be one that is empowering. But you also can have a collective experience that is oppressive in nature, that can collectively seem like it's trying to hold you down. And I think that negative aspect of those experiences that people like me, and when I say people like me, people of color, people who are sometimes marginalized, those experiences are so common that we're seeing this boil over, right? I think that's why we're seeing so many people kind of almost pick a side in this thing, right? Because we can relate to different perspectives. The same thing with pandemic. That's the thing that makes it so much of a pervasive topic, is that we all are, dealing with it. And usually there's only, certain sections of society that deal with a collective experience. But this pandemic has brought us all to a place where we can share that experience. And the thing that really is on my mind and on my heart just these days is, what can I do? And really, that is the question for me as a man, right? As a man, as a black man, as an entrepreneur, as a person who cares about the future of our society, of our country, what can I do? And so I'm trying to use the motivational fabric of who I am to tie in a way to just share perspectives. I think for me, sharing perspectives and also going and seeking out other perspectives to help me understand is a big part of what I'm evolving into, is one who's really concerned with sharing the perspective from one holder of the perspective to another, so that we can have understanding which I think leads to actual progress.
I love it. I love that. So one of the stories that's in my upcoming book that I haven't finished yet is a story about me traveling to go see my now late grandfather in New Orleans. And on my way from Atlanta to New Orleans is the city of Tuskegee, which is where he grew up in the 1930s and 1940s. And so Tuskegee today is a much different place than it was in the 1930s and 1940s. But I'd never been. I'd heard stories from my grandfather and my father about this house that he grew up in, and my dad remembered the smell of the bushes out front. That was his big memory of visiting his grandmother, and who has long since passed away. I decided I want to stop and find this house. I didn't know what number it was. I didn't know what it looked like. I just knew that it was on Elm Street. And so I get off the interstate at Tuskegee, and as you probably know, I don't look like most of the folks in Tuskegee.
Gotcha.
And so I feel this kind of, the eyes are on me. I'm like, oh, well, this is a new concept. You know, I don't typically feel this way, but it's that experience that I haven't really had before. Driving through town, and I pull down Elm Street, and I see a house that just kind of resonates with me. Something about this particular house. So I pull over on the side of the road, park my car, and I get out, and I walk up to the door. And this black lady answers her door.
Yeah.
And she says, "Can I help you?" I said, "This sounds crazy, but I think my grandfather grew up in this house." And she looked at me and she goes, "Is your grandfather Dr. I said, "Dr. Winters." And she said, "Come on in." Nice. So I went into her house. She introduced me to her 90-something-year-old, I think 89, 90-year-old mother named Dorothy. I sat in that house for 2.5 hours and had tea with them. And we just became friends. And I said, "Do you have pecan trees in the backyard?" And she said, "Yeah, how'd you know that?" I said, "Well, did you know that Dr. George Washington Carver had dinner in this house once a week with my great-grandfather?"
Wow.
She said, "I had no idea." I said, "I have a picture of my great-grandfather sticking, or Dr. Carver with my great-grandfather sticking a metal rod in the ground. And a pecan tree had blown over. My great-grandfather called Dr. Carver over to say, 'Hey, it was a pretty light wind and I lost a pecan tree. You know, what gives?'
Yeah.
And he stuck a metal rod in the ground and said, 'Dr. Winters, you have a bedrock that's pretty shallow here, and the root system couldn't grow in, so it grew out.'" And I said, "One more question before I leave. Did you know that the Commodores, the band, bought this house for my great-grandmother?" And she said, "I was married to one of the Commodores." She said, "We have a son together."
That's
so,
nice.
Little short story. Don't mean to hijack your episode.
No.
It's stories like that if you step out of that, which is part of the whole narrative of The Art of Everything, it's something ordinary, knocking on the door, the art of knocking on a door. But the biblical reference is, seek and you shall find, ask and it will be given, and knock and the door will be open. And it takes someone being willing to say, "I'm going to knock on this door, and I don't know what I'm going to receive on the other end. I could be condemned, I could be just berated, or I could be welcomed in and loved on," which the latter happened to me. But I feel like each time we're together, it's both of us knocking on each other's door and saying, "Will you let me in?"
Yeah. When someone lets you in, it's giving you the opportunity to share their perspective. By you walking through that door after knocking on and being welcomed in, you were able to taste the tea that they drink.
Wow.
The tea may have tasted like the tea you drink,
Yep.
or it may have tasted completely different, but you were able to sit on the couch that they sit on. You were able to look at the photos on that wall.
Yep.
And you were a part of what you experienced when you were there. And the sharing of perspective is powerful. One of the things that I think is, we need a shared perspective on, especially now, is this topic of police brutality. I bring it back up because it's there is a huge gap there. I was at a friend's home, and this is a friend we have in common. Older gentleman, older white gentleman, and I went out to his land, and he had called a few people together to say, "Help me understand what's going on. Help me understand the anger. Help me understand why the sentiment is what it is." And we had an opportunity to share perspective. I said, well, okay, let's think about what was normal for me. I'll give you an example. I was about 16, maybe 17 years old, and I'm from an area called College Park, Georgia, but also Clayton County. And so I had traveled to College Park from Clayton County, maybe a 20-minute drive, 15-minute drive, and I was headed back. It's kind of late at night, may have been 11 o'clock. I'm just a kid in my dad's truck, and coming off of a road, turning onto what's 138, headed back to Clayton County, and it's late at night. I'm just headed home, and when I make the left at the intersection, a car gets behind me. It's dark. This is not a well-lit road, but a car gets behind me, and they have no headlights on. So I can see that figure of a vehicle got behind me, and they were following me. So, the way I grew up, I understand sometimes there's carjackings, folks get robbed, so
high alert.
So I kind of pick up my pace a little bit. I start driving a little faster. The car keeps up with me. And we got maybe half a mile, 3/4 of a mile down the road, and we had gotten up to probably about 85 miles per hour on a street that 45 miles per hour is the limit.
Yeah.
And 3/4 of a mile into this thing, my heart's racing. I'm thinking somebody is trying to either rob me or harm me in some kind of way. Then the lights come on, the police lights. His headlights come on, and then the siren comes on. It's the police. Now, these are the folks who are sworn to protect and serve me, right, as a citizen. But instead of protection, I felt terror. Right, I was truly afraid, and I really had done nothing wrong. And so, we grow up where if the police get behind you, pull over in a well-lit area. Keep your hands on the steering wheel where they can see them. And I pull over, and I'm just terrified. If it had been just a robber, okay, I just keep going, to find my way out of it. But the police is a different story. And the guy comes to the window and he shines the light on me, and I was speechless. I didn't even say, "Why'd you pull me over?" I'm just like, "What's about to happen?"
Yeah.
There's nobody around to witness anything, and the officer just says, "What are you doing out?" I said, I'm just going home. I'm just going home. And he asked me a couple of questions, but then he just says, basically, "You need to get home, go home," or whatever. Okay, I'm out of here.
That's where I was going.
So I get home, and the thing is that wasn't a uncommon, or the fact that happened didn't seem odd.
Yep.
It was just, that's the way it is. And I asked him, I said, "Well, if this were your daughter, you're you are an older white American, you are well-to-do, so to speak. This is not the same experience that your children would consider to be just fairly regular. Glad I made it out of it." But in sharing that perspective, it hopefully helped him to understand. Because the idea was, well, over the last year, I think was the statistic that only 9 black men, unarmed black men, have been killed by police officers. And police brutality is not just about murder. It's about terrorism. It's about exercising an authority over a community that you're exercising force that is completely not required. And this same force, if it were exercised against your own children, you would be appalled and outraged. But for us, it's supposed to be okay because, well, that wasn't murder. But that's but that's the normal existence. And a lot of times those types of stories, those types of perspectives are not shared. We only see the extreme. This person was killed. Oh, he stole a candy bar. So he was in the wrong. So, you know, why was he stealing the candy bar? Or, you know, he was using supposedly a $20 bill that wasn't real. And yeah, I mean, the guy was in the wrong. The outcome should not have happened, but a lot of times you don't have to be doing anything wrong. And that's the part that I think we need to share. I can remember when I did do something wrong, and the outcome was, to me, unjustified. I was near Turner Field. I used to teach anger management classes for a nonprofit organization called the Igbara Foundation. And one of the locations we taught it was in an area called Summer Hill in Atlanta. And there's a road, Georgia Avenue, and it kind of comes down near the old Brave Stadium. And Ralph David Abernathy, I was leaving from teaching his class, doing a good thing. I wasn't tearing down society. I was actually helping to build it up. And you know how you're going through a traffic light and it turns yellow, and you can either slow down and stop, or my 21-year-old self at the time, I kind of picked up my pace. You know, the light turns red as I'm coming under it, and I get a few blocks down the road, and the state patrol is behind me. So yes, I had run the red light. I had done something wrong. But when he pulls me over, he says you ran the light, and do you have any contraband? And I'm no, I don't have any contraband. And another state patrol vehicle pulls up, and it, you know, that area was kind of you know, it's a rougher area. And they said, well, you sit on the curb. You can't stand. You can't pace back and forth. You sit on the curb, no matter how hot the concrete is because the sun's out. You sit there, and we're going to search your vehicle. And they literally searched my vehicle for, I guess, contraband. But that's not what happens to people who are white in a lot of cases. They don't have, their kids don't tell those stories. So I think it's very important for us to share the perspectives so that the understanding begins to kind of go both ways, to see that, okay, this is deeper than just murder. Murder is really bad. But there's a way of living that shouldn't be the way it is. And that's why you see so much anger at the system. And people hate to hear that term, the system. But systematically, the anger is justified, I believe.
Wow. I guess you can't put a statistic on mistreatment.
It's hard to measure.
And so, I mean, I would love to do nothing more than to converse back and forth. But I think there's a time for talking and there's a time for listening. And I had a few people reach out to me, especially after I made a blog post called "This Is Not News." And some of them were like, "Oh, I'd love to have this conversation. Let's do a podcast together. Let's do this." And I said, "Look, I appreciate you thinking enough of me to want to do this and to think me worthy to be in the room with you." With that being said, I think there's a lot of anger. I feel like there's a lot of emotion, and rightfully so. And for us to go and talk about it is valuable, but not right now. Now is the time to listen. It's not the time to talk. And so I appreciate you sharing those stories with me, because you're absolutely right. I don't have those stories.
Well, I would actually encourage your viewers and listeners to go on to, I saw what you're talking about on your LinkedIn page.
Yep.
I would really encourage them to go and read what you wrote, because what you wrote touched me, because you were seeking to understand. That's priceless. And that is what is absolutely needed for our society to flourish, for all of us to flourish. We have to seek out, why do you feel this way?
Yep.
I've sought out perspectives from people like you. The person who I went and who I'm talking about, we had this conversation at his home. I wanted to. I listened to what he shared with me, and some of it was, what? Wow, that's your experience. That's the way you feel. It was amazing. Yep. So you're right. Sometimes we just have to listen to each other and hear one another out.
Yep. And you have to, if you're going to extend that hearing, actually listen. It's one thing to hear, it's another thing to listen.
Listen from here, right?
And absolutely. But be willing, if you're going to reach out that hand and say, I'm ready to hear, be willing to sit with no time constraint, with no preconceived notions, with no expectations, and just listen. A quote that my grandfather, same one who grew up in Tuskegee, used to say is, to criticize is to say you're not like me. And there's a lot of critical comments being made and criticisms being made, and I just have to sit in that and just kind of soak it in and say, he's pretty right. To criticize is to say you're not like me. But after hearing your stories this morning and knowing as much about you as I know, I'm thankful that you are you and that you're willing to share you with me and with all of us this morning. So I know that folks will want to continue this conversation. How can they get in touch with you? How can they read or listen to your books? Let us know how they can continue the conversation.
Absolutely. I think I'm fairly easy to find. If you, I'm John Dilworth on LinkedIn. Dilworth is Dilworth. On Facebook, I'm John F. Dilworth. On Instagram, which is where a lot of the motivational things I share can be found, John F. Dilworth on Instagram. And then you can pretty much use those sources to find the link to my books. But basically, they're on Amazon. So they're pretty easy to find, audio format, Kindle format, hard copies. But John F. Dilworth is pretty much how you find me.
Awesome. Well, I can surely attest to the quality and just the inspiration that's found within all of your writings and with all of the things that you say and do. To answer your comment earlier that you made about me, you have a presence. You have this aura and it's attractive, and you got an awesome smile and it's contagious. So continue to smile, continue to shine your light, because the world seems to be increasingly getting darker. But you can either look at that and be discouraged that things are getting darker, or you can say that your light ends up shining farther.
Yes.
And so that's where I see you. So I appreciate you joining us this morning and for everything that you shared with us. I love you, man.
I thank you for having me. I love you too, brother.
Yep. For everybody watching in, listening in, sure are glad that you joined us today in the jungle with my friend John Dilworth. We'll catch you next time, and y'all have a great day. See ya.